Good evening, class. This is Mr. Gilbert, and welcome back. This is another watercolor video. I'm going to talk a little bit about color choices in terms of what to buy for your watercolor set in the future. I know the one that you have right now is a really good student set, but if you're going to get into watercolors later on and be more serious about it, you're going to want to have professional grade, artist grade pigments in your watercolors. You're going to avoid certain pigments that tend to fade or darken with exposure to sunlight. So what I've picked is a group of paints that will be a great place to start from, and I'll also link to a website where you can sort of explore alternate pigments if you so desire. So let's start with just the primaries that I have. I've got a kind of a split primary set here, and what that means is that I've taken into account the fact that a lot of the different colors that are part of the primary set, red, blue, and yellow, each one of them has a tendency to drift one way or the other towards one of the secondaries on the color wheel. So for example, the cadmium red is a bright, brilliant red, but it's a little bit on the orange side. And so if you try to use that to mix purples with a blue and red mixed purple, you're going to end up with something that's a little bit more dull and not quite as vibrant as it should be. So that's why I also have another red, which is Quinacridone Magenta. It's also known as Quinacridone Violet. It's also called Rose. There's a lot of different names for it, but I'll explain that a little bit in the later part of the video. But just to show you what happens, so if I use the cadmium red to mix a violet, you can see that cad red is just a really nice, brilliant red color. Let's mix it with a blue and see what happens. You can see that purple area is just really dull and not very inviting. You can even try to add a little more blue to it to make it more intense. It just gets really dark and muddy. Okay, it's not very pretty. So what happens if I use the Quinacridone Violet or Magenta? I think this one's called a Rose. No, it's called Magenta. So try it with the Magenta. So you can see the Magenta leans a little more bluish anyway. I get a much nicer, deep, intense purple mixture with that. Okay, and for the blue, I used ultramarine blue, which leans a little bit towards the red. So similarly, if I use a Prussian blue, which leans more towards the green, I'll start with the Prussian blue. And if I add that to my magenta, again, the purple's not quite gonna get there. It's still a little bit dark and muddy. It's better than this one for sure. You can see it's just not quite there. Let's see, and if I even did the, you can see what happens. This is gonna be brown basically. This is the cadmium red with the Prussian blue. It's almost a nice neutral gray actually. It's kind of a pretty gray. Okay, and so the same thing happens with the yellows. You've got, I've got a couple different yellows, cadmium yellow, and this is a benzimide something or other, also called azo yellow. This one's given the name permanent yellow lemon because the actual chemical name is impossible to pronounce. So azo yellow, cadmium pale, ultramarine blue, and Prussian blue are my sort of main colors. I also use, occasionally I'll use a Cerulean Blue. I'll show you what that one looks like. Cerulean's just a really nice sky blue, but it leans green a little bit, so it makes really nice green mixtures. And so does the Prussian, makes really nice green mixtures. And the Phthalo Blue is another one you could try. That's also an effective blue-green. And this one's really blue-green. They're not all like that. Some of them are more, almost more of a primary blue. So rather than having one set of primaries for 3 colors and then having to buy a yellow, or I'm sorry, an orange and a green and a violet, I could have 2 sets of primaries and be able to cover all my bases that way. So that's kind of how I constructed my palette. I also throw in some great earth tone colors because I like to have a yellow ochre, a burnt umber, transparent iron oxide is another one that I really like. Okay, so that's part 1 of this video, and then part 2 I'll explain what the different pigments are and what to look for when you go to buy them. Okay, thank you.